Hi, welcome to our YouTube-friendly version of NTD News. What you'll see here is only the content that YouTube allows. For our complete, uncensored broadcast, head on over to ntd.com, and you can click on the link below. See you there. Former President Trump's co-defendants have started to surrender to jail in the Georgia indictment. NTD's Melina Wisecup is tracking updates for us at the jail. Melina, tell us more about those first to surrender.
Hi there, good to see you. So 2 of Trump's co-defendants have already surrendered here to this Fulton County jail. Behind me, one of those being John Eastman, who is Trump's former attorney. Eastman is the one who pushed that legal theory that Vice President Mike Pence had authority to reject slates of electors on January 6th. After Eastman was bailed out on $100,000, he came to speak to reporters saying that he has not spoken with former President Trump after the indictment. He also said that he does not regret challenging the election results here in Georgia. Here's what Eastman told us, along with my question to their defense attorney about what their legal strategy is moving forward.
I am confident that when the law is faithfully applied in this proceeding, all of my co-defendants and I will be fully vindicated.
Sir, which of the charges do you think will be the most difficult to challenge, and can you share with us any plans of your defense?
If you read our lawsuit, that was the predicate for what was going on in Georgia.
So just before Eastman, Scott Hall was another co-defendant to surrender earlier this morning. Hall was charged with 7 counts, 6 of those being conspiracy charges, such as conspiring to unlawfully obtain voter data. Now, aside from these 2 co-defendants who have already surrendered, we're also seeing more consent bail agreements pour in. We saw some today from figures like Jenna Ellis and Kathy Latham, as well as others. As for former President Trump, his bond is set at $200,000, which is the first time Trump will have to pay a cash bail in any of these indictments. There's also certain restrictions on Trump's consent bail, including what he can say about this case and who he can speak to, including social media posts. The district attorney says that this is meant to prevent witness intimidation.
So how is this process playing out once they go in the jail? How long do they have to stay, and what happens when they're there?
Well, based on what we saw this morning with Scott Hall and John Eastman, it's a pretty quick process. They were in and out within a couple of hours. This is probably different than the normal ordinary defendants in other cases that you would see come through this jail, and that's mainly because they did already make consent bail agreements with the district attorney, speeding up that process a little bit, that paperwork. But as far as the process when they're actually inside the jail, the sheriff says that they're still subject to the same processing, such as fingerprinting, mugshots, etc. Now, one defendant I do want to point out, because he's making more efforts here on his case, is Mark Meadows. Now, he wants to extend his deadline to surrender to sometime next week, because he does have a hearing set with the federal judge on Monday. But just based on emails that we've seen between the district attorney and Meadows' attorney, it's not looking like the district attorney is willing to extend Meadows' deadline here. As for former President Trump, he says he'll be here on Thursday to surrender to this jail. Back to you.
Thanks for that update, Melina. Next, Trump allies believe Arizona will be the next state to indict the former president. This comes after the Georgia indictment cites Arizona numerous times in connection with an alleged fake elector scheme. NTD's legal correspondent Arlene Richards has more details.
Could Arizona be the next state to charge former President Trump with attempting to overturn the 2020 election? Some of Trump's strongest supporters are predicting that it will likely happen. Days after the Fulton County District Attorney announced her indictment of Trump and 18 others, former Arizona GOP candidate Kari Lake said in a social media post, "I expect they'll order Katie Hobbs and Chris Mays to indict Donald Trump ASAP." The Georgia indictment cites Arizona numerous times in allegations that Trump and his allies created false electoral college documents and recruited individuals to convene and cast false electoral college votes at the Georgia state capitol. It states the defendants executed similar schemes in Arizona, Michigan, Nevada, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. The individuals who allegedly cast the false votes have been called fake electors. Michigan's Attorney General indicted 16 individuals, accusing them of engaging in a fake elector scheme. But she didn't name Trump. A Wisconsin judge is allowing a civil lawsuit against fake electors to go forward. And the state's Democratic Attorney General, Josh Kaul, has not ruled out a state probe. Arizona's Attorney General confirmed to local media that she's investigating fake electors.
We are taking this investigation very seriously, very solemnly.
Arizona Governor Katie Hobbs said last week at an event in Arizona that her Attorney General should follow Georgia's suit.
Absolutely. I have been an advocate for holding folks involved in trying to overturn the will of the voters in the 2020 election accountable, and this is part of that.
KTAR News reports that Hobbs' communications director said in a statement Governor Hobbs misheard the question. She was responding generally about her belief that anyone who breaks the law must be held accountable for working to overturn free and fair elections. Republican Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene thinks Arizona is next.
Well, I'm sure Arizona is next. And just as Stephen Miller laid out, this is a conspiracy, a grand conspiracy by the Democrat Party to use the justice system at the federal level, but also in the states.
Arlene Richards, NTD News.
And Republican presidential candidates are preparing for the first primary debate. They all have different strategies going in. Here's some topics the candidates might bring up.
8 candidates have reached the polling and donor thresholds needed to qualify for the first Republican primary debate. Those are former President Trump, former Vice President Mike Pence, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, South Carolina Senator Tim Scott, former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley, North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum, biotech entrepreneur Vivek Ramaswamy, and former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie. One issue that might come up a lot is abortion, according to journalist Elizabeth Nolan Brown.
Mike Pence, who is a very true believer in the pro-life side, he really has already hit hard at someone like Trump, who is much more squishy about the issue, and I think that Pence sees this as his chance to shine.
Another topic is Biden's age and Vice President Kamala Harris.
Nikki Haley in particular has already sort of been talking about her and how, if you're voting for Biden, you're actually voting for a President Harris. And that's not an entirely unfounded concern. I mean, Biden is up there in age.
Other topics might include former President Trump, support for Ukraine, support for Israel, culture war issues, and illegal immigration. According to a Republican strategist, the U.S. will undergo a stress test over the next 18 months that it has not undergone since the Civil War.
I hope we can survive the stress, but it's going to be put under an enormous amount of pressure over the next 18 months.
Former President Trump, who is fighting legal battles, says he'll not attend the debate. One reason might be the event will get more viewers with him attending, because some will tune in just to see Trump. A presidential historian points out how the upcoming election is unprecedented. A candidate running while at the same time dealing with multiple felony charges.
Once in a while, historians ought to admit that there are uncharted waters, that there is, in fact, new history being made.
The first GOP debate will take place on Wednesday in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
And speaking of the debate, GOP candidates Larry Elder and Perry Johnson plan to sue the Republican National Committee, or RNC. This over being excluded from the debate, despite their claims that they met the RNC's requirements. Elder wrote on X that the rules were rigged and he intends to sue the RNC to halt Wednesday's presidential debate. His post says, quote, "The establishment leaders at the RNC are afraid of having my voice on the debate stage." In a statement, Johnson also claimed he met the necessary qualifications to be on the debate stage and announced that he will take legal action against the RNC. The RNC's requirements for the first debate included polling at least 1% in 3 national polls. Candidates must also have 40,000 unique donors, with at least 200 unique donors per state in more than 20 states. South Texas is enduring heavy rains and power outages as Tropical Storm Harold makes landfall. This is the state's first tropical storm of the hurricane season. Harold made landfall about 10 a.m. this morning near South Padre Island on the Texas Gulf Coast. The city of Corpus Christi has received about 3 inches of rain, and some isolated areas in Texas and Mexico are seeing up to 6 inches of rain. The National Weather Service also recorded winds of up to 50 miles per hour in Corpus Christi. The storm knocked out power for at least 20,000 people, and 2 counties were under flash flood warnings. Harold is moving northwest across the mainland at about 20 miles per hour. It's expected to weaken into a tropical depression. Authorities are urging residents to check road conditions before traveling. And as tropical storm Hilary moves out of Southern California, it leaves behind a city in need of serious tidying up. NTD's Christina Corona tells us more from Los Angeles.
Cleanup operations are in full swing across Southern California as communities work to recover the aftermath of Tropical Storm Hilary, which brought historic rainfall to the region. National Weather Service meteorologist Richard Thompson tells us the last time a tropical storm hit SoCal.
This is historic. This is the first landfalling tropical storm in Southern California since September 25th, 1939. So it's been a few decades since this actually last occurred. So it's definitely a very rare occurrence.
Thompson says as the storm continues to move northward, it continues to weaken to a point where it's a post-tropical depression.
Hilary formed, it became a strong or a Category 4 hurricane. Then as it continued moving north, over the coastal waters there, it gradually weakened. And by the time it came onshore at the Mexican border, it was a tropical storm, which means like wind speed or wind gusts between 39 and 74 miles per hour.
The storm barreled through the city, flooding streets, triggering mudslides, and leaving thousands without power. The rain unleashed record-breaking downpours overnight, which dumped more than half the average annual rain on some desert and mountain areas. The Los Angeles Fire Department responded to more than 1,800 storm-related calls for service.
Yes, there was a lot of just like it was flooded like crazy up to the sidewalk and stuff. Like we had a sandbag part of our house in front of our house and stuff like that.
Well, we did receive. You look at the rainfall totals across Southern California. Coastal areas received upwards of 4 to 5 inches. In the mountains and deserts, you had upwards of some areas in excess of 10 inches of rainfall. So that much rainfall in such a short period of time, there were many reports of flooding.
As Los Angeles starts to dry out following the heavy storm, there have been no reported deaths, serious injuries, or significant damages in the state so far. Christina Corona, NTD News, Los Angeles.
The leaders of BRICS nations are meeting in South Africa. The main topic on the agenda, expanding the bloc by letting more nations join. Here's what the heads of state have to say about that.
Chinese leader Xi Jinping met with South Africa's president on Tuesday ahead of the joined BRICS meeting. President Cyril Ramaphosa presented Xi with the Order of South Africa before the two talked about expanding BRICS.
South Africa and China have similar views with regard to the expansion of BRICS.
China is now the strongest advocate of expanding the bloc. Right now it consists of the countries of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Although it's not clear which countries might join in the future, a possible contender would be Argentina, which is suffering from high inflation. Brazil's president Lula da Silva commented on that on Tuesday, saying it is very important for Argentina to be in BRICS. We want BRICS to be a multilateral institution, not an exclusive club. Russian President Vladimir Putin won't be attending the event. He published a statement on the meeting on Tuesday, saying BRICS works for the global majority. He also addressed Ukrainian grain shipments, which Russia is blocking. Many African countries depend on Ukrainian grain.
We have decided to send 25 to 50,000 tons of grain to 6 African countries, free of charge, including free delivery of these cargoes.
Putin did not address expanding BRICS in his remarks. As of right now, BRICS already includes more than 40% of the world's population and a quarter of the global GDP.
And another top-ranking U.S. official is set to visit Communist China. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo is scheduled to travel to Beijing and Shanghai next week. This as the White House hopes to reopen dialogue with the world's second largest economy. The Commerce Department said a wide range of discussions will be on the agenda. Topics include challenges faced by U.S. businesses in China, the U.S.-China commercial relationship, and other areas for potential cooperation. Just recently, Washington removed 27 Chinese companies from its export controls. But that's as China's economy is slumping with an all-time high youth unemployment rate and a looming real estate crisis. Economists fear that the negative impact could eventually reach beyond China's borders. Raimondo will be the fourth Biden administration official to visit China this year, following Secretary of State Antony Blinken, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, and climate envoy John Kerry. And over in Pakistan, a Muslim crowd attacked a Christian community after an alleged desecration of the Quran. Now, some Christians say they're afraid to return home. NTD's Jason Perry has the story.
A Muslim mob in eastern Pakistan attacked a Christian community on Wednesday. It started after two men allegedly desecrated the Quran. The crowd destroyed several churches and set many Christian homes on fire. Residents said that even a Christian graveyard was desecrated. According to witnesses, the rampage lasted 10 hours without any intervention by police who stood nearby. Pakistani police denied this, saying they prevented an even worse situation. Later on, when there were no immediate arrest for the alleged desecration of the Quran, some residents began protesting.
Our Punjab police are doing nothing. When a man smuggles cocaine, he is apprehended within hours. But the person who has committed blasphemy has not been arrested after 24 hours. The police should side with the Muslims.
By the following morning, security personnel had blocked off all entry and exit points to the Christian community.
When I saw my house, I felt a jolt in my heart and I thought I was going to fall. I immediately came out of my house and sat down. We haven't committed any crime. All this is a grave injustice to us.
Police have arrested almost 160 suspects in connection with the attacks. Meanwhile, police also arrested two Pakistani Christian brothers for blasphemy. They are accused of desecrating the Quran, a crime that is punishable by death in Pakistan. Police said pages of the Quran were found on the street with derogatory comments written on them in red. And one of the attached pages had the names, addresses, and national identity card numbers of the suspects. A provincial police chief said they are investigating why the names and other identifying information would be attached to the evidence. A court ordered the two brothers to be held for 7 days for questioning. Dealing with the aftermath, a Christian mother said this about returning home after the attacks.
I don't want to go back to that place with my young daughters. I want a safe place for my family to live in. The fear that has been embedded in my heart and my children's minds is just not going away.
But other Christians continued their prayer services on Sunday right outside of their vandalized church. And a resident said a Muslim delegation offered their mosque for Christians to use as places of prayer and worship. Also, a Pakistani official on Monday said every Christian family whose home was destroyed will be paid the equivalent of about $7,000. Jason Perry, NTD News.
Stranded in a cable car, dangling hundreds of feet over a valley for 14 hours. Now all those 8 people in Pakistan are finally safely back on ground. 6 children and 2 teachers were traveling to school in northwest Pakistan when one of the gondola's cables snapped this morning. They were stuck some 900 feet above a valley as strong winds made rescue difficult. 2 of the passengers were plucked from the cable car more than 10 hours later by helicopter, while 2 others were rescued by local zipliners. After night fell, the other 3 people were also rescued. Many children who live in remote parts of the region rely on cable cars to ferry them to school and back. And at least 18 burned bodies were found in a Greek village today where wildfires had been raging for days. Nearby, tens of hospital patients were evacuated onto a ferry to escape the flames, according to the fire brigade.
Greek media said those found dead were thought to be migrants, as the broader Evros region is a popular route when crossing from Turkey into Greece. Nearby, on the same day, dozens of hospital patients were evacuated onto a ferry in the Greek city of Alexandroupolis. Hundreds of firefighters have been trying to contain the blaze since Saturday, but fanned by gale force winds, it quickly spread, covering the city in smoke and turning the night sky bright red. Authorities said 65 patients at the University Hospital of Alexandroupolis had been evacuated as a precaution onto a ferry in the port. 14 more people were evacuated by a Coast Guard vessel from a beach near the village of Makri. And as flames approached the Alexandroupolis Metropolitan Church Foundation, people were evacuated in wheelchairs and stretchers. Father Christodoulos Karathanasis, director of Holy Metropolis of Alexandroupolis, was part of the effort.
We managed in just 4.5 hours to transport 200 inpatients from both institutions, saving them from the threat of fire. Some were able to walk and others were bedridden.
The ferry turned into a makeshift hospital. Elderly patients lay on mattresses strewn across the cafeteria floor. Paramedics attended to others on stretchers, and a woman held a man resting on a sofa, an IV drip attached to his hand. Several communities in the broader Evros region, near the border with Turkey, have been evacuated, as authorities warned the risk of new fires remains high in the coming days.
A ninth bus carrying illegal immigrants has arrived in Los Angeles from Texas. This time, the mayor criticized the Texas governor for sending it during the tropical storm. Meanwhile, several governors banded together to call out President Biden over the border crisis. NTD's Eileen Ang has more.
Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass slammed the Texas governor for sending families with toddlers towards tropical storm Hilary. In a statement, she said, "If anybody understands the danger of hurricanes and thunderstorms, it's the governor of Texas, who has to deal with this threat on an annual basis. This is a despicable act beyond politics." The bus departed from Brownsville, Texas on Sunday as city officials warned Angelenos to brace for the peak impact of the storm. It arrived at LA Union Station Monday evening. This comes as the city voted in June to be a sanctuary city for immigrants. Overwhelmed at the border, Texas has been sending migrant buses to more liberal cities like LA and New York. This is the 9th migrant bus that has arrived in LA. On Monday, the Texas governor and 4 other governors held a press conference in Eagle Pass, Texas, responding to the open border policies.
Every state in the United States is a border state. Sure, it's Oklahoma, it's all the way to South Dakota. You heard Kim Reynolds in Iowa talk about it. Look at what's going on in New York. Look at what's going on in Illinois. They may be Democrat governors and Democrat mayors, but they're fed up as much as Republicans are with the Biden administration and the way that Biden is destroying our states and our cities and our country. Americans will not tolerate it anymore.
Abbott claims President Biden is responsible for thousands of migrant deaths. In response, 25 states are supporting Texas to secure the border. The influx of migrants came after Title 42 expired in May.
And in San Francisco, the Roman Catholic Archbishop is filing for bankruptcy, citing hundreds of child sex abuse lawsuits against the Archdiocese. The suits came after California passed a law to extend the statute of limitations in child sex abuse cases. NTD's Jason Blair has more.
The Archbishop of San Francisco announced on Monday a filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy to, quote, manage and resolve more than 500 lawsuits alleging child sexual abuse. The lawsuits come after California Assembly Bill 218 passed into law, which allows claims that previously would have expired under the statute of limitations. San Francisco Archbishop Salvatore Cordileone said in a press release, quote, "It is the best way to bring much-needed resolution to survivors while allowing the Archdiocese to continue its sacred mission to the faithful and those in need." The press release also says that the overwhelming majority of the alleged abuse cases occurred more than 30 years ago and involve priests who are deceased or no longer in the ministry. It also says a number of measures and resources have been put in place over the years, such as victim counseling services, background checks, and an independent review board consisting of an abuse survivor, psychologist, 2 physicians, a retired police officer, and others. The Archdiocese serves San Francisco, Marin, and San Mateo counties with a Catholic population of 442,000. Also in California, both the Oakland and Santa Barbara Archdioceses filed for bankruptcy this year, also citing financial challenges from hundreds of sexual abuse lawsuits. In Rome, a child abuse prevention panel put together by the Vatican for the entire Catholic Church is estimated to have its first report in 2024. Reporting from San Francisco, Jason Blair, NTD News.
Goldman Sachs is warning its clients that Washington is on track for the first U.S. government shutdown in 5 years. I talked with NTD Business's Don Ma for more. Don, great to have you on our show. Thanks for coming on. Now, why is Goldman Sachs saying that we're heading for a shutdown?
Yeah, so here's some context first before I answer that question. Why are we even facing a threat of shutdown? So under the Anti-Deficiency Act, federal agencies cannot spend any money without appropriation or approval from Congress. Therefore, when Congress fails to enact annual appropriation bills, federal agencies must cease all non-essential functions, and that's known as the government shutdown. So then why would Congress be unable to pass the appropriation bills, right? Well, Goldman Sachs is arguing that a thin House majority and a dispute on spending levels, among other disagreements, are making things complicated for Congress. So Goldman Sachs thinks that a shutdown is actually more likely than not later this year.
So if we do go into a shutdown, what would that look like?
During shutdowns, some federal employees, not all of them, are told not to report for work. Government employees who provide essential services like air traffic control and law enforcement will continue to work, but they don't get paid until Congress takes action to end the shutdown. But keep in mind that this applies to only about 25% of federal spending that's actually subject to annual appropriation by Congress. A shutdown could also potentially delay the release of federal economic reports, including the ones on inflation and the labor market.
So should we be worried about a potential shutdown?
Well, it seems like Wall Street may not be losing any sleep over this because a government shutdown would cause some problems for individuals, but it would not be very damaging to the U.S. economy at large. And Goldman Sachs basically says the same thing as well. And Steph, we have to understand that a shutdown is far less severe than a U.S. debt default. So benefits like Social Security, Medicare will continue to flow because they're authorized by Congress in laws that do not need annual approval. And the Treasury can continue to pay interest on U.S. debt on time. But, you know, Steph, because the risk to the economy is lower, that actually potentially could remove some pressure for Congress to reach a decision in time. And that's what Goldman was saying too, that because the government shutdown will be manageable for the economy, that's why it may be likely to happen.
And if we do see a government shutdown, it certainly wouldn't be the first one.
Yeah, of course. The last government shutdown took place in 2018 to 2019 and lasted 35 days. That was the longest shutdown in U.S. history. And that shutdown didn't deal a fatal blow to the markets or the economy.
All right, Don Ma, always great to have you on. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Steph.
Digital transactions only. KFC, Taco Bell, Pizza Hut, and others are planning on 100% digital sales. NTD's Colin Frederickson has more.
Digital transactions only. Fast food chains like Taco Bell, KFC, and Pizza Hut are hoping to have 100% of their sales be digitally driven in the future.
We are advancing our digital strategy to one day achieve 100% of sales powered by digital.
Yum Brand's CFO Chris Turner says this means more people will order online, on their phones, or at in-store kiosks. Yum is doing this largely because it thinks it'll make more money. When it made shifts toward digital in the past, order sizes grew, customers ordered more frequently, and there were more marketing opportunities.
When it comes to wanting to go to a 100% digital world, I see those restaurants wanting to do that. I understand the speed, the convenience, the security that's there. but I just don't see it happening anytime soon.
Payments expert Kevin Olson sees pros and cons to going full-on digital, both for restaurants and for the world. On the pro side, he says cash is expensive, dirty, and comes with security concerns. Digital is obviously more convenient. On the con side, many low-income people can only use cash. They'll be left out. And many Americans don't like digital only. Olson believes we won't see a 100% digital future in his lifetime, largely for this reason.
In the US, we've been fighting it. Businesses were saying, hey, we're going to go cashless. And the city governments and the local governments got involved and said, no, you can't do that. Until we get to the point to where as a society, we are 100% on board for going 100% digital, I don't see it happening.
Yum Brands hasn't specified a time frame for its all-digital goal. Turner believes the government is likely to step in if it gets too close. Colin Fredrickson, NTD News.
And now for your sports news, we're joined by NTD's Dave Martin. Dave, Michigan suspended head coach Jim Harbaugh for 3 games yesterday. What was the reason for that?
Yeah, it's really to lessen what should be a harsher sentence when the NCAA does eventually rule on this, which will probably be sometime next year. They'll just subtract these games from whatever sentence they give him. Now, there's been some apparent behind-the-scenes negotiating where Michigan reportedly offered a 4-game suspension to the NCAA, which they rejected. So we know it's going to be longer than 4 anyway. But basically, this is for alleged recruiting violations that may have happened a couple years ago, that this is going to possibly happen.
Now, Michigan is currently ranked 2nd in the country. Do you see this impacting their season?
No, not really. They were very smart about this. He's going to miss the first 3 games. All are against unranked, non-conference opponents where they'll be heavy favorites. And if they do add some games on next year, it'll probably be to the same kinds of opponents. So it's almost like Michigan found a way for him to miss maybe the least difficult games on his schedule. So if it was done on purpose, it's looking like a pretty smart move.
Now, moving on to baseball, the once mighty New York Yankees have lost 8 games in a row. What's going on there?
Yeah, they're really struggling right now. But really, that this is even a story, they're only 4 games below 500. That this is even a story is really a testament to their greatness over the years. If this continues and they end up with a losing season, it'll be their first in more than 3 decades. Now, they still have some good players. Garrett Cole's having a great season. Aaron Judge has missed some time, but he's had a great season. They just haven't got much help for those two. I think what'll be very interesting is what happens in the offseason. Do they keep manager Aaron Boone and GM Brian Cashman? I think they should. I think they will. Both guys have a long history of success, but this is hard for the fans to watch for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Now shifting gears to tennis, Novak Djokovic beat Carlos Alcaraz in a long and somewhat epic match. Do you think we'll see a rematch at the U.S. Open?
Yes, I'm sure I'm not the only one who thinks that, but these two have really been head and shoulders the best 2 players on tour this year. And they've got a nice rivalry going. You know, Sunday was the 3rd time they've played this year, and it was a second that was for a title. It was a 3-set match that lasted nearly 4 hours. I think really what Djokovic is doing is pretty exceptional. A 36-year-old, he's keeping up with a 20-year-old. It's been pretty amazing. They've got a nice rivalry budding, especially with Federer out, with Nadal injured. It's nice to see this rivalry going, even if we know because of their age gap, it probably won't last that long.
All right, thank you so much, Dave. Great to have you on.
Thank you, Steph.